They're the lawyers on the front line of some of the most gruelling work in the legal world.
There was sometimes around 20 or 30 clients a day who would come in for advice and assistance in court in quite urgent matters.
I saw a lot of women that were fleeing violent relationships.
I wanted the law to work in a way that was beneficial to those that needed it the most.
But outside the courtroom, back at Legal Aid, these lawyers say they're struggling.
People who look like me will find it very difficult to do their jobs at Legal Aid, will find it very difficult to be accepted in that organisation. I stand out quite forcefully. I typically don't wear, the black and the pinstripes, and everybody knows I'm quite flamboyant and, oh, here comes Miss Chivunga.
Tendai Chivunga first joined Legal Aid's Newcastle office in 2015. Within her first year in the job, the Zimbabwean-born lawyer says a colleague began excluding her.
There was one particular occasion where we were supposed to be standing in our office teams. We were at a big conference. My colleague was there, and I remember he said, "What are you doing here? Bugger off." I recall there were times when I was left out of team meetings. I remember doors being slammed in my face.
How did that make you feel?
Isolated, segregated, at that point in time inferior, and hurt. There's nothing more different than my skin tone, and that was enough to frighten people away.
Tendai officially complained in March 2016 and listed 13 incidents which in her view amounted to misconduct. 2 months later, an internal investigation found the colleague had not engaged in workplace misconduct. She claims the colleague's behaviour then escalated.
I was out with a friend one night and we were sitting having drinks. It was an after-works event, and that colleague attended the same premises, and he began to abuse me quite viciously, to the point where the staff had to call security and have him removed from the premises.
Tendai later applied for another solicitor position with Legal Aid.
The colleague that I had made a complaint about was on the judging panel for the job that I had applied for. And I remember interviewing in front of him and having to look him in the face with everything that I knew and everything that I had been through. I knew at that point that I would never get that job, and I didn't.
Tendai now runs her own practice but is contracted to take on Legal Aid cases as a private lawyer. She's involved in a number of disputes over her handling of some of these cases.
And I'm being scrutinised just like I was when I used to work there. Everything has to be perfect, and then some.
Since Tendai left Legal Aid 6 years ago, at least 23 culturally diverse employees have left the organisation.
When you have to function at a higher level to do the job that you can do every day at the same capacity as everyone else, it's racism.
After 7:30 put Tendai's allegations to Legal Aid, the organisation has limited the number of legal aid cases she can work on. Legal Aid New South Wales told 7:30 that it doesn't tolerate discrimination, treats allegations seriously and takes action. Life has changed for Jane Christian after taking indefinite leave from Newcastle Legal Aid 2 weeks ago.
It's 2022, and I think most people think this kind of racism was on show back in the 50s, but the truth is that it's never stopped.
Jane is a Darug woman.
I'm a fair-skinned Aboriginal person, so I'm often in white spaces, treated as a white person.
In June last year, Jane had a conversation with a staff member about a decision not to hire an Indigenous candidate.
She then went to describe that person to me and told me that she wasn't the right fit. And I asked, what do you mean not the right fit? And then she then gave a number of descriptors referencing the individual who didn't get the job speaking with a twang and her skin colour being her whole identity. I understood it, that she was too black for an all-white office team.
A month later, Jane lodged a formal complaint. In it, she also detailed how staff at another legal aid office had referred to Indigenous peers as lazy and that they take too long on walkabout. After the complaint, Legal Aid commissioned a cultural review at Newcastle and took disciplinary action against Jane's colleague. Despite the review's 17 recommendations to enhance inclusion, 8 out of 12 Aboriginal employees have since left the Newcastle office.
So I think when you do speak up about racism specifically, you inevitably get branded as a troublemaker or a difficult person. I think the system views you as a spot fire that just needs to be pacified and put out.
Legal Aid told 7:30 that the review of the Newcastle office found most staff hadn't seen or experienced overtly racist or discriminatory behaviour. They said they're taking steps to ensure the office is a safe and culturally inclusive workplace.
To go to work to an institution that claims to be defending the poor, the marginalised, it's in those places where we find it most challenging because we believed in the idea of that institution.
Professor Chelsea Watergo has researched race and inequality across the country and says many workplaces are poorly equipped to deal with complaints of racism.
Typically, the HR response is a PR response. It's protecting the institution, not centering the victim and addressing what has happened to them. Taking this to the public square, I think, offers victims something more than the internal process which insists that victims stay silent.
7:30 has obtained an anonymous survey of legal aid staff which details over 80 allegations of discrimination and over 50 allegations of racism last year. More than half of all Aboriginal staff have reported experiencing racism or discrimination, but most felt complaining wouldn't make a difference. Lawyer Sarah Ibrahim has worked at Legal Aid for a decade and has decided to blow the whistle on her employer.
My observation of racism in legal aid means you are excluded at different points in time where you shouldn't be, where you're overlooked where you shouldn't be, where you're seen as the problem when you shouldn't be, or where you're not seen as an authority in spaces where you should be.
The Egyptian solicitor has her own firm but works at Legal Aid's Sydney branch part-time. She recently complained to the Ombudsman saying Legal Aid poses a serious safety risk for racial minorities and asked that the complaints handling process be investigated.
I don't know every marginalised person, racialised person in legal aid, but all I know is that I'm not alone.
7:30 spoke to 17 other Legal Aid New South Wales staff from culturally diverse backgrounds who all feel the biggest barrier they face is a lack of career progression and opportunities. Last year, Sarah took her concerns to the top, writing to Legal Aid's executive.
I got to the point where I decided that I was going to speak up. It was a really big decision for me.
In an email, Sarah wrote that she wanted to be heard on her experience of racism over the course of her employment. A meeting never took place.
I think we can't ignore it anymore. You can ignore me individually, but you can't ignore the collective.
The lawyers say speaking out is just the latest chapter in a career fighting for justice.
I started this conversation and I'll keep having it because it's too important and it affects too many people.
What we find with people who speak out against racism, oftentimes they're not wanting a reward for their suffering. They're wanting change.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.